Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all of your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your paths. Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Many Christians know this verse by heart, and growing up in a Christian home, I recited it often. It's actually one of my favorite verses, and I've recently taken up my memory verses again. As a child, the message here was simple. Trust God. And today, the message is still just as simple, but simple things are not always easy. They say advice is what we ask for when we know the answer but wish we didn't. That's not always true, but it's true more often than most of us would like to admit. I was reading my verses this morning and I came across this verse since it's on my schedule for today. And I realized, probably not for the first time, but for the first time in a while, the full magnitude and simplicity of this verse. Firstly, it's not what I thought it was going to be. A command. It's actually a call to prayer. Too often when I was younger, I treated prayer like a command. Like God had to answer, and answer the way I wanted him to. Somehow, I'd gotten it backwards in my head, like God answered to me. Which is fairly obviously not true. Quite the opposite, in fact. God is my commander. I do as he commands, but only because I've given him my heart to command, because he's gracious enough to allow me that choice. See, the reason I thought I commanded God is because he cares for us and looks out for our every need. A father and a butler can look the same to a child, since both will readily attend to the child's every want and need, within reason, of course. But a father does so out of love, and will discipline his child if the need arises. A butler is forever kind, usually out of obligation to the family he serves. And the two are distinctly different from an adult perspective, but to a child they look the same. So I had to grow up to realize that. I know it seems silly that I had mixed up, but I've always been slow to realize things. So God cares for us as his children, and does attend to our needs, and he also pays attention to our desires, because he cares so much for us, as any father would, and he wants us to love him in return. But you can't make someone love you. They have to choose. And to choose to love someone, as I've noticed more recently, you have to first respect them on some level. Respect and love are interestingly entwined. We view them individually, but rarely give thought to the similarities they reflect from one another. Both produce loyalty and strength, and have to be returned in kind in order to survive. God wants us to love him like he loves us. So first, he treats us with respect and care, that we might return it in kind. God is my commander, and I follow his commands, but only because I choose to. And withdrawing that grace and that ability to choose from me would have damaged my respect for him and destroyed the love I could have felt for him. Love sure is complicated, and yet so beautifully simple. I guess that's how I got it so mixed up. Anyway, back to my earlier point, Proverbs 3, 5, and 6 is not a command. I thought it was at first because it tells us directly to trust God, acknowledge him, and rely on him. But it's not a command. Because as I've just said, God commands us only if we choose to obey him. Proverbs 3, 5, and 6 is God asking us to trust him, to acknowledge and respect him, and to lean on his guidance. He's asking us to ask him to command us and guide us. And I am happy to answer that call. It's so simple, and yet simple things are not always easy. I trust God, and I pray often, and I ask him for advice, but that's not all the verse says to do. Trust in the Lord with all of your heart. Have you ever trusted someone that much? With all of your heart? Even if they were telling you to do something that went completely against everything you believed in, you could trust that they knew exactly what they were doing and had your best interests at heart. And if they were wrong at all, it would destroy everything you were, everything you'd worked for. Have you ever trusted someone that much? I hadn't, before I went to boot camp. I found God there on Paris Island. With everything removed from my life, every day being driven to the point of exhaustion. There were days if I didn't know if I had the strength to continue. And I was forced to trust God to see me through. And I realized that he would. And that I could rely on him for anything and everything, even if everything else told me not to. If I could trust no one else, I could trust God. See, that's the first part of what God asks us in this verse. Next, he asks us to lean not on your own understanding. It's taken me a long time to fully comprehend what this means. It's telling us to pray. But not just that. Remember how I said love could generate loyalty and strength, and need to be returned in kind? Our thoughts, our actions, our very lives are driven by emotion. And many times, such emotion can drive us to do things, think things, that we really shouldn't do. Have you ever done something out of anger, or sadness, or fear, or some other powerful emotion and later realized it was a mistake? Oftentimes, our own understanding is not reliable. But God is perfect. God doesn't make mistakes. His understanding is perfect. And we need to lean on it. We need to pray about every big decision that could significantly improve our lives. We need to trust God and trust in His understanding of our situation. And trust that the actions He tells us to take are the right ones. God wants us to come to Him with all of our problems. Like any father, He wants us to ask Him to help us solve our problems. He wants us to come to Him broken and confused and ask Him to help us fix what's broken. And He will. He always has. He'll pick up the pieces and put us back together again. In all of your ways, acknowledge Him. This is actually twofold. We need to acknowledge God, both in the sense that we love and respect Him, but also in the sense that He is our caretaker, our Father, our teacher, guider, and the source of our salvation. After we've come to God, asked Him for help, and He's given us the answer and worked things out, we need to turn around and thank Him, and acknowledge that He is our source of strength and salvation, that He is our Father and teacher, and that He cares for us. And we need to do this for everything. How many of us go to church on Sundays, sing songs of praise, give tithe, maybe even go home to a godly home with the words faith, hope, and love mounted over the door? But then we go out into our workplace, to social areas, and live out our public lives just trying to blend in. Many of us don't acknowledge God in those areas because it's unpopular to do so. But what did He say? In all of your ways, acknowledge Him. All of them. Every aspect of our lives must reflect God, and we must acknowledge every small victory He gives as His glory. If we deny Him, say we did it on our own, that He didn't help us, how can we then say that we are His? All aspects of our lives must reflect God if we truly love and respect and trust in Him and lean on His understanding. Trust in the Lord with all of your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. In all of your ways acknowledge Him, and He will direct your paths. How many of us grew up without a clue where we wanted to spend our lives? Some of you probably had a clue, but how did you know how to go about doing it? Many of us don't. We've never done this before. How can we be expected to know what we need to do to get where we want to go? A lot of us might have had a plan, but if you were to list all of your hopes and dreams and desires, how much of that list could be accomplished by your original plan? Speaking from experience, I had a lot of conflicting plans. I wanted to travel the world. I wanted to see a lot of different places and meet lots of people. And I also wanted to settle down and start a family, maybe build a house somewhere. And I also wanted to be respected and revered by my peers and loved ones. I wanted to take leadership courses and learn to build myself into the man I knew I could be a good father for my kids one day. But finding and acquiring the resources to accomplish all of that would take a lifetime. I had to turn to God. Only after I put my trust in Him, asked Him what to do, and acknowledged that I couldn't do it on my own, did He show me the most simple and brilliant solution to all my problems at once. Join the military. That's one of the most amazing things about God. He can take a situation that seems hopeless and improbable with no visible solution and more problems than someone could ever hope to deal with, and He can clean it all up in one simple answer. God can tell you exactly where your life needs to go, almost like a GPS for your car, only better. He can help you avoid traffic and pick the most enjoyable and fastest routes. and even help you get back on track if you make a wrong turn. That's what this verse is. That's what Proverbs 3, 5, and 6 means. It's a call to prayer, a call to trust God, and a call to let Him fix your life. If you trust in God with all of your heart, lean on His understanding, not your own, and if you'll acknowledge Him in every aspect of your life, He will fix what's broken, lift you up, point you exactly where you need to go. And if you've trusted Him that far, it should be simple to follow. But like I said, simple things aren't always easy. Luckily, God will help you if you just trust Him. Thanks for listening.